So our first speaker is going to be Chuck Moreau. Chuck has a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Minnesota Institute of Technology, a master's of urban and regional planning degree from the University of Minnesota's Humphrey Institute. He's a professional engineer licensed in the state of Minnesota, a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. Chuck is a lead author of Thoughts on Building Strong Towns, the author of a world-class transportation system, and founder and president of Strong Towns, a concept which he had presented in hundreds of cities and towns across America. Chuck's going to talk first, and then Joe's going to follow him. So Joe Mancosi has a bachelor's of architecture from the University of Miami, and a master's of architecture and urban design from Harvard University. Before moving to Asheville, he was the primary administrator of form-based code for downtown in West Palm Beach, Florida. He's a founding member of the Asheville Design Center, a nonprofit community design center dedicated to the creating of livable communities across all of Western North Carolina. Currently, Joe is the principal of Urban 3 LLC, a consulting company of downtown Asheville real estate developer, public interest projects. His work has been featured in the Congress of Urbanism, American Planning Association, International Association of Assessing Officers group, and New Partners for Smart Growth Conference. So we're going to also bring up Rodney Collins, our esteemed town manager, and Paul Niswicki, who's running a little late from former. Oh, sorry, Paul. Didn't see you. Everyone knows Paul and Rodney. We're going to have a kind of panel discussion and then Q&A with the audience. So take your notes. There's going to be a lot of interesting facts around this presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chuck, and everyone enjoy.
That's very polite. We applaud ahead of time in Minnesota too. They don't everywhere else in the country. They wait to see if they should boo or throw tomatoes or applaud. So very friendly, thank you. Very nice to be here today. Joe and I have had the privilege of presenting together a number of times, and we've come to call our joint presentation Shock and Awe. I'm the shock part. So I am going to, kind of like in basic training, I'm going to tear you down so that Joe can build you back up. So I'm here to deliver, in a sense, like the bad news or the conflict plot of the story, and then I'll turn it over to my friend Joe to get a little bit further into the resolution maybe, or the hopeful aspect. Just real briefly, I run a nonprofit organization called Strong Towns. Our mission support a model of development that allows our cities to become financially strong and resilient. In 2008, after years of working as an engineer and a planner for cities all over Minnesota, after going through a crazy election season, at least it felt crazy at the time, it seems kind of quaint looking back now. Banks failing, $1 trillion bailouts, gas over $4 a gallon, all these like insane things. I was so frustrated, I sat down and I started to write. I started to write about cities, I started to write about the towns I worked with, I started to write about projects, and I started to try to explore this question, why do our cities struggle financially? Why do we lack the money to do basic things? Why can we find the money to put a $9 million shortcut around the south side of town, spend $14 million running sewer and water up to a spot 2 miles out of town, but we can't keep firefighters employed. We can't keep the library open past 4 o'clock. We don't have money to fix the crosswalks. Why is this? And I started to write about what I was seeing. I started to explore these questions. After a year, some friends of mine asked me, they prompted me to start a nonprofit. They actually filled out the paperwork for me and submitted it. A year later, we had a 501c3, and a few months after that, a foundation in Minnesota gave me 3 years of startup money with the express purpose of going out and sharing this message with as many places as I can. So I thank you for giving me that opportunity tonight. I'm going to share with you some of our insights, and I'm very happy to be here. If we go back in history and think about the way cities were built thousands of years ago, we understand that they were built very differently than they are today. These are two artist renderings. The one on the left is an ancient city called Fertile Crescent, like 4000 BC. One on the right, of course, is ancient Rome. When we think about these cities, we understand that they were built around the dominant transportation technology of the day, that of course being your 2 feet. The people who lived here walked everywhere they went. So the spacing, the scale, the distances between different things you would do on a normal day. All this was based around a society of people who walked. We can fast forward thousands of years. This is my hometown of Brainerd, Minnesota. I live a little over 2 hours north of Minneapolis, St. Paul. This is what it looked like in the early 1900s. People would arrive by train, they would arrive by stagecoach, but once they got there, they would walk everywhere they went. And so very much like you had seen for thousands of years, the spacing, the scale, the distances between different types of things you would do on a normal day, all this is based around a society of people who walk. Of course, today we do things differently. In the early 1900s, we began to build cities around a different transportation technology, right? Began to build cities around the automobile. We came up with different building types, different building styles, different ways of arranging things on the landscape. If we ask people to explain this transition, they're likely to talk about it in terms of progress. We used to walk everywhere, so we build cities around people who walk. Now we drive everywhere, so we build cities around people who drive. Someday we will have jet cars, and we will build cities around people in jet cars. And someday we will teleport, and our cities will look completely different than they do now, right? This is a narrative of progress. And it's very comforting for us to think of it this way, because it puts us on this continuum of things always getting better. There's another way to think about this, however, and I want to plant this seed in the back of your head. It's not as comforting an approach. When we look at these ancient civilizations, what we have to acknowledge is by the time you get to even ancient Ur, humans had been experimenting with how to build cities for thousands of years. They tried different things, what worked, they would expand upon, what didn't work. Those places failed, right? People died, things didn't go, those ideas weren't copied to the next generation. By the time you get to ancient Rome, you have a pattern of development that had been refined and honed and copied over thousands of years, knowledge gained by trial and error experimentation. And by the time you get to the early 1900s, and my city, as my city was being built, you have a pattern of development that is essentially universal. We have different building types, different building styles, different architectural styles, different materials. But the essential layout and design, the idea of having places that were incrementally built, walkable within each other, this was standard around the world. There's always somebody. Sometimes it's me. When we look at this style of development, and one of the things about my early engineering years when I would ask questions about this, I was always told, well, Chuck, this is the way things have always been done. And of course, this is not the way things have always been done, right? This is a very recent thing. Sometimes we think the ideas for this come from second book of the Bible or something. No, where do these ideas come from? These were ideas from think tanks, European intellectuals that we brought here and instituted on a grand scale across a continent all at one time. We didn't do this by trial and error. We didn't try it out in New York State and see how it would work for a couple hundred years. We just did it here, everywhere, all at once. We transformed an entire continent within one generation. Everything about how we live. Not only how we get around and how we build our homes, but how we interact with each other, our politics, our social interactions, our cultural interactions, and our economic interactions. We transformed thousands of years of one knowledge system of how to do things. We adopted a completely different one in the blink of an eye. What I want to talk about tonight are some of the financial ramifications of this approach. One of the things that I did early on at Strong Towns, in those early days of the blog, was to look at developments that I had experienced and try to understand financially what was going on. Development, especially from a city's perspective, is a very complex thing. Sometimes you bury a pipe a little bit deeper because you're going to extend it further. Sometimes you overbuild a road because you're going to connect more people someday. I was looking for things that didn't have a lot of white noise. So this, for example, is a dead-end cul-de-sac. These are just simple residential homes. This was a gravel road. The city went out to pave the road. When they went and built it, the city paid half, the property owners paid the other half. We looked at the tax base that the city was getting from these property owners and said, how long is it going to take their city to recoup the money that they just spent building that road? The answer is 37 years. Now, the road's not going to last 37 years, but it's going to take the city that long just to recoup what they spent to build it. They're going to, of course, have to go on and fix it. Where's that money going to come from? Here's another development. This one is a residential development, closed-loop system. dead-end cul-de-sac, no through traffic, no commercial traffic. This is just a residential development. This was built in the early 1980s. A developer came in, put in all the infrastructure, built all the homes. When this was done, turned that over to the city to maintain. The city has plowed the streets, mowed the ditches, maintained all this stuff. They got to the point where they had to go out and fix the roadway, do a major repair project on it. The cost was $354,000. We asked the question, based on the taxes the city's collecting from the people who live within this development, the only people who really use this road in any substantive way, how long is it going to take the city to recoup what they just spent to fix this road? The answer is 79 years. Now the road's not going to last 79 years. So we asked, okay, let's say the city wanted to collect from these property owners here enough money between now and the time the road fell apart to actually go out and fix it. What would this mean? It would mean an immediate 46% increase in taxes, with annual increases of 3% over inflation every year for the next 25 years, with all that money going just to maintain the roadway. The sewer, the water, the stormwater, all that stuff, vastly more expensive. Sometimes people say, okay, Chuck, we get it. We know we lose money on residential. We make it up on commercial. Commercial's our cash cow. To which my response is, first of all, how's that working out for you? Second of all, I don't know any corporation that loses money on 90% of what it does and tries to make it up on the last 10%. I don't know why an incorporated municipality would think that's a good strategy. Like, whatever happens here, we don't care. So this is a business park. This is one of those investments that municipalities build, kind of a build it and they will come way. Let's make this investment and it will attract business. This was built in the mid-1990s. It was so successful, every single lot is built upon, and this city wanted to go out and build the exact same thing on property they own right next door. They said, this has worked so well, let's build the same thing right here. We said, okay, if we can do the exact same thing for the exact same amount of money and get the exact same amount of investment, would this be a good deal? The cost is $2.1 million. The total amount of assessed investment out there is $6.6 million. Now, pause for a second. Of the developed lots out there, 4 of them are a church. 2 of them belong to the school district. It's their bus maintenance building. 1 is a city maintenance building. 1 is a county maintenance building. All of them are very important. We need churches, we need schools, we need maintenance buildings. None of them pay any taxes, right? Of the remaining ones, the ones that theoretically would pay taxes, every single one was given a tax subsidy in order to attract them to move into this business park. For the sake of our analysis, and we tried it many, many ways to make the numbers work, the only way we can make it work is this. If we assumed that the entire park would be built out within 12 months of finished construction, so within 12 months, every single lot would be built upon by a full tax-paying, non-subsidized entity, and that every penny of new revenue would go to retiring that debt. If that were the case, it would still take almost 3 decades, 29 years, for the city to break even. That's 29 years where everybody else's taxes would need to go up to pay to plow the snow, mow the ditches, provide police and fire protection, and all the services that would be needed. And that's in the most wildly optimistic scenario. I used to go through and do like 15, 20 of these. After a certain point in time, people would just start to cry. For expediency's sake, I'm going to do 3 tonight. I think you get the picture. Let me walk you through from a cash flow standpoint what is going on, because this is a pattern we see repeated over and over and over again. Let's say that a developer comes to our community, says, I have a piece of property here I would like to build upon. I will, at my expense, build all the residential homes. I'll build all the commercial buildings. I will put in to your standards and your requirements all the pipes and the pumps and the valves and the meters. I'll put in the sidewalk and the curb and the roads and the streets. I'll pay for all of that. I'm not asking for any variances. I'm not asking for any subsidies. I will follow all your rules. The only thing that I'm asking as a developer is when I get done making this investment in your community, that you, the city, the public, the municipality, you agree to take over the responsibility long-term of providing service and maintaining this. What would we say? We say, fantastic, right? You want no handouts, no subsidies, you're paying for everything, you're following all of our rules. This is perfect, this is ideal. But let's say, we're very smart people here, we're very prudent people. We want to make sure we do the right thing. So when the money comes in from this new development, what we're going to do is we're going to take the portion that we get spent fixing and maintaining stuff around the town, and we're going to set that aside. And every year when that money comes in, we'll set some aside and we'll allow it to accumulate so that when we get out of generation, we've got a pot of money here to make good on all these promises that we're making today. Here's what that looks like. In year one, everything is brand new. Hasn't cost you anything. The money comes in and you take that portion and you set it aside. Year two, a little bit more comes in, you add to it, you add in year one. In year three, you add a little bit more, and on and on and on. And you can see a 5-year-old road doesn't cost you anything. A 10-year-old sidewalk isn't costing you anything. A 15-year-old pipe isn't costing you anything. So you keep going out in time. What you've got is just money coming in, nothing going out. You get out a couple of decades and you feel very, very rich. The problem is when you get to year 25 in this example, and you have to actually make good on that promise that was made a generation ago, what you find is that the cumulative amount of money is insufficient. And from a cash flow standpoint, you run far into the negative. Now, cities aren't one development, right? Cities are a series of developments, a collection of neighborhoods. So let's say our developer comes back in a couple years after that first project and says, that project worked out really well for me, it worked out really well for you. I would like to do a similar size development. And every other year from this point forward, a developer comes in the door with a similar size development. In other words, the ideal scenario, nice, steady, continuous growth. And we take that money and we set it aside and we save it for the day when we have to make good on all these promises we're accumulating as we grow. Here's what this looks like. In year one, you've got your first development. It's going to pay in the entire 25 years shown here. In year three, you add another. Year 5, year 7, and on and on. And not only are you having money come in and nothing going out, everything is brand new, doesn't need maintenance at this point, but you're having growth upon growth upon growth. You're feeling very rich. Your cash actually starts to accelerate upwards. And when you get to year 25 and you have to make good on that very first promise you made back in year 1, yeah, you got to spend a little bit of money, but it's not a big deal, right? You've had all this growth. The growth creates what we call the illusion of wealth. If you lose money over the long term on every project that you do, the further you go out in time, the more downward pressure there is on your budget. This is the answer to that question that I was struggling with. Why are cities going broke? Why, despite all the investments, despite all the job creation, despite all the economic development, why do we struggle to do basic things? Why don't we have any money? It's because we live way, way, way out here. We just got through, a year and a half ago, one of the craziest election cycles that I've ever been through. I think most of us in this room would say the same thing. And I'm going to say something right now, and those of you that know in your hearts that you're a hyper-partisan person, I'm going to ask you to dial that partisanship down to like 1 right now. Because what I'm going to say is not a partisan statement, and I don't want you to interpret it that way. When I look back at our last election, presidential election, what I see were 2 70-year-old candidates looking back at their lives saying, what was the pinnacle? What was the best we were as a country? And here's how I'm going to get us back to that. So whether your version of a great America was blue-collar jobs and Aussie inherited living, or whether it was an expansive government that could expand Medicare and Social Security, do a great society and all kinds of things, what point in our history was that? That was right here. Right here. That's when that was. We don't live there anymore. We live way, way, way out here with all of these accumulated promises. Do you recognize yourself in this graph? Do you recognize? This is why people smoke, right? This is why you will go home and instead of going for a walk or having some exercise, you will sit down in front of the TV and have a bowl of ice cream, right? Right? Like, oh, this ice cream is good. I really like this show. Uh-oh, heart disease. This is a human failing. This is human behavior. This is the way we're all wired. Psychologists call this temporal discounting. We as humans are wired to highly value positive feedback today and to deeply, deeply discount, if not completely ignore, potential negative feedback in the future. It's not an evil thing. It's not a right of center problem or a left of center problem. It's a human failing that we all share. What happened to the civilization thousands of years ago that built their economy and their approach to building cities around exploitation of this human flaw? What happened to them? But what happened to them? What happened to this? What happened to the people who got around and said, you know, let's do this in this way? What happened? They went away, right? Their experiment failed. They died out. Their ideas were not copied and transmitted to the next generation. We find ourselves today in a place where nobody else has ever been. No other civilization in all of human history have taken literally the thousands of years of accumulated wisdom, thrown them out the door, and started over on a continental scale with a brand new approach. No one has ever done this. We are in a place where I think the primary adjective I would use to describe what is needed is humility. We don't know what we're doing because no one has ever been here. All we know is that it's really not working. There's some huge implications, obviously, to this, right? The way we are growing makes us poorer. The more we grow in this way, the poorer we become. Our local governments, our cities, our towns, are being forced to absorb the costs of their own development pattern. We drove in here today, and I was just astonished at the mile after mile after mile of fire hydrants along the road. No development, just woods, hydrant, hydrant, hydrant. And even when we got to development, it was so like spread out and wide. I'm looking at this, and I'm an engineer. I've put water pipe in the ground. I've built hydrants. You know, every time you see a hydrant, just think in your mind, like $85,000, $85,000, because that's what it costs between the two hydrants to put that pipe in the ground. Where is the wealth that's going to take care of it? Where is the wealth? And I'm looking at that going, this is just astounding. If you want that fixed someday, the federal government's not going to do that. The state's not going to do that. They don't have the money to do that. You're going to have to do that. This can't be done. And I focused on your water, but we can look at the roads. We can look at the potential new sewer that is being asked of you. All these different infrastructure systems that you have. This can't be done. We cannot meet these obligations without some insanely huge tax increases and or some devastatingly large cuts in services. Now this is the debate we're having everywhere, right? Every government around the country, everywhere, is having this debate. How big is the tax increase? How big is the service cut? It is critical that we see the third variable in this sentence, the third variable being the current pattern of development. As long as we continue to build in a way that is functionally insolvent, there is no way our cities will avoid insolvency. As long as we continue to build in a way that gives us an illusion of wealth today in exchange for these enormous long-term liabilities, there's no way that our cities will avoid default. Whether that's a hard default, like we see in places like Stockton and Detroit and San Bernardino, or whether it's a soft default, like we see in thousands of cities across this country, where they lay out police and firefighters, they don't, they put off critical maintenance, they don't make the investments they should because they don't have the money. We have to start having a conversation about how we build places that are financially more productive. I want to leave you with this thought here. When we look back in history, what we see are cities that to us seem chaotic. They seem, to be built in a very different way, and that's because they were. A lot of times when we talk about pre-depression development and post-war development, we focus on the automobile as being the major characteristic that changed. But really, there are two characteristics that change that are more fundamental than that. Because we can go around the world and see other societies that have the automobile that do not have the American development pattern. The American development pattern shifted in a fundamental way. First, let me combine them together. Before the Great Depression, When we built cities, we built them incrementally on a continuum of improvement. Today, we build things in large blocks to a finished state. When we build something today, we go out and build it, and it's done. There's never an anticipation of a next step, of a future addition. We build things complete in large blocks, and they're done. This has massive, massive implications. It has massive implications for the life cycle of development, who is going to finance it, who's going to come to the table as a developer, who is going to get wealthy from it. It has huge implications on how it's maintained, how it's fixed, how it's renewed. And I want to show you this pre-depression development because this is literally the way we built cities for thousands and thousands of years. This is my hometown back in 1870. This is the very first iteration. And you were pointing out before, like, this is a railroad town in the Midwest. Yeah, but Boston at one point looked like this in the past. It didn't have these trees, and maybe the wood was, but the people who landed here popped up little pop-up shacks. That's what they did. The people who lived here, the first iteration of building were little pop-up shacks. That's what everybody did. And we can go back through thousands of years of human history all over the world, and the very first iteration of every city that we think of today that was started prior to this new suburban experiment began as a little set of pop-up shacks. And what would happen is that over time, as more things coalesced, things would start to grow incrementally. The value of the place would become more, it would justify more development. What we would see is that the place would grow incrementally out, incrementally up, and become incrementally more intense. And so that street I showed you earlier is this street. This is Front Street. Here's what it looked like 30 years later. It's the exact same street. And after another 40 years of growing incrementally up, incrementally out, and becoming incrementally more intense, these investments here would be transformed from wood structures into buildings of brick and granite. The way cities build wealth, the way cities have always built wealth, is by making modest investments over a broad area over a long period of time. This is so critical to our understanding of how cities have grown successful and how they need to grow successful. And we've lost it. We've lost this, and really it's a byproduct of this temporary blip of affluence that we had, where we were able to reshape everything all at once in a short blink of an eye. We are the only people in all of history who believe that when we build something, we're done. We're the only people with that level of conceit, that when we build it, it is complete. Nobody else has ever considered their work complete. It's always been something to pass on to the next generation. Always a work in progress. Always something that will continue. I want to show you now, as a final image before I pass on to Joe, what has happened to this street. Because this is a picture from the 1940s. This exact same street now today looks like this. It's a wasteland of parking lots and half-occupied buildings. And while for generations, really for centuries, for millennia, we grew successful cities slowly and incrementally over time, what we have done now in our transformation to denude them down. When you look at this street, when I look at this street as an engineer, what I see right off the bat is a $500,000 public investment in sidewalks and curb, in street, in pipe. And then I look and I say, where's the wealth that's going to pay for that investment? Generation after generation after generation. We have to have a conversation about how we build places that are financially more productive. And that is where I'm going to hand it off to my good friend, whose expertise is in answering that exact question. Thank you so much.
So, where do we go from here? How do we deal with it? Who's seen me present before? Just show of hands. A couple people. Okay, no shouting out the answers to the top. I have to wrestle with an idea, like how do we talk about cities? How do we talk about places and time of cities? And I've kind of like settled on a really simple way of talking about it. The cities all have a form of DNA. Chuck's talked about that DNA of growth that's pretty real when you see it looking backward. I'll show you a way of looking forward. This is me when I had hair, and this is my path. right? So I'm on a trajectory to be Papa, whether I like it or not. Or more importantly, again, when I had hair, I'm going to be my father. I've got 2 genetic issues. I'm genetically Italian. You can see that from my name and how much I wave my hands around when I talk. But we also suffer from a genetic predisposition of heart disease in my family. So I've got this conflicting interest. I'm Italian, I want to eat like a pig. But at the same time, I got to watch what I eat. What I've learned in following, I actually went to University of Miami when DPZ was designing this, and it seems so obvious to me. It's just, why wouldn't you create a city? And it's funny, we had to learn this all over again. We had to learn these patterns of cities, this DNA. How do you make a place that's going to grow into something? And what I usually challenge communities to is who's your grandfather or grandmother? What do you want to be when you grow up? Right? I have a model. I know what my models look like. So I'm from Asheville, North Carolina right now, and we asked our family in Asheville, like, what's Asheville going to be when it grows up? And I can tell you, Asheville actually does have conscious models, positive and negative. One of our negative models, our heart disease, is Atlanta. We're nowhere near the scale of Atlanta, but we're looking at Atlanta and realizing it's had heart attacks that we don't want. We're also looking at places like Charleston and seeing the positive effect, the salads and the exercise that we want to have. So what's Mashpee want to be when it grows up? What's your model? What's that in your head, right? So that's one lesson. I'll give you another quick lesson. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to tell me how many, for those of you that have seen me present before, don't shout this out. Tell me how many shapes you see in this kid's puzzle. I'll give you 5 seconds. Ready, go. 18, 9. The 19 so far is the highest, and we're going to go higher than 19. That's not shaking. No one wants to go higher than 19. How many kids were on the bus? Anyone?
6.
5. What time was it on the clock?
3.
5 after 5. 5 after 10, sorry. See, you didn't see these things because I didn't ask you those questions. What's interesting to me is how we ask questions about cities. We have a responsive brain and we have a slow thinking brain. And oftentimes the patterns of our cities require slow pattern thought. And we often ask the wrong question. We're looking at the wrong data. We're not seeing things that are hiding in plain sight. We didn't see those 5 kids on the bus because I didn't ask you that question. That's the way our brains operate. And what I see in our work, with Chuck's work, people are asking the wrong questions about their communities. We're taking our biases, our own attitudes in the city conversation, and not seeing the complex machine that it actually is. And we allow ourselves to basically drive ourselves broke in the process. So let's talk about Asheville. Y'all know where Asheville is? About 4.5 hours northeast of Atlanta. It's up in the Appalachian Mountains. Beautiful setting, Blue Ridge Mountains. Bluegrass music. We're 90,000 people. We have 40 breweries. If he wants to do the math on that, that's about 5,000 people per brewery. We drink a lot. And like any quirky little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. They're typical little things. Well, it didn't start that way. This is the shot of Asheville in the 1980s. Completely boarded up and broke. Look at this wonderful fixer-upper. Hey, Buff, why don't you come and invest in our town, put a little elbow grease on this thing and fix it, right? That's a 1996 Shiny Celebrity. We were dirt, poor, and broke. And like it required, anytime somebody tried to fix downtown, people would rise up and say, that's not who we are. We're rural mountain people. We've been down that urban road, it doesn't work for us. Right? We're asking the wrong question. I went to work for this guy. Julian Price inherited a tremendous amount of money. $15 million. He invested in a for-profit real estate development company called Public Interest Projects. 75% of the money went into the sticks and bricks, fixing buildings, and we reserved 25% to seed entrepreneurs. So the first vegetarian restaurant we capitalized. Asheville's now one of the top 10 vegetarian restaurants in the country. And it's about making that community happen, investing in people that could reward the community and give back. So this is one of our buildings before and after. Really fancy, and the building was just sitting there hiding behind that metal screen. We just polished it. So this is all about making 400 square foot unit apartments. And we were told by banks this would never work. No one would ever want to live in a 400 square foot apartment. Who lives in a 400 square foot apartment in this room? Let me change the question. Who in this room has lived in a 400 square foot apartment? That's our marketing style. That's how we did it. Think about how cities operate. Now, the other thing that Julian was doing, he passed away in 2001, was constantly communicating with the citizens. Why does it matter for you all what we do as development? And he had his own magazine. I love this. I mean, look at just boarded up beautiful buildings just sit there fallow. Among cities with no particular recreation skill, those that have preserved their past continue to enjoy tourism. Those that haven't receive almost no tourism at all. Tourism simply doesn't go to a city that's lost its soul. Now, it's not that we were like boosters of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. We just wanted people to have a sense of pride of the place. 15 years after we published this, Farmers Magazine would list us as the #5 place in the country to visit. 2 years ago, we got listed #1. We're 90,000 people. We get 10 million tourists a year that come through my town. That's a cash flow. So for those of you that have been to Asheville, thank you very much for supporting our businesses, because now I have the option of those 40 breweries and the 150 restaurants downtown. Kind of awesome for me. So that's great, Joe. This is a fun story, but what does it mean? So what it means is we're a $15 million investor in a $100 million downtown. By fixing those upper stories of those assets that were there, the value of downtown grew to 500 million. Those are buildings that were already there. We didn't receive a new building until 2008. So that value was just sitting there, ready to use. Now, to the city's credit, they actually stepped out and did things like streetscape projects, parking decks, to get the buildings active. They changed the zoning code. There are no parking requirements in our downtown. None. 0. What they're doing is a collaborative strategy of providing that infrastructure as part of the development. So this is what happened. If some people tell me, like, Joe, you don't understand, that's Asheville. We have politics here. So these are the politics of Asheville. This guy's complaining about $26 million of streetscape projects and parking in the downtown. Okay, $26 million is a lot of money. I don't have $26 million bucks in my pocket, right? Let's do some math. If you invest $26 million in a $100 million asset, and that $100 million asset grows to $500 million, is investing 26 and yielding $430 million, is that a good return on investment?
Yes.
Yeah. So why do we listen to Chris? Chris doesn't stop Chris, by the way. Chris has a website now. This is Fire and Birdstone on the mayor. I like how he's misspelled charlatans. I asked the mayor, I'm like, is that a liquor thing? She's like, yeah, it should be. But Chris is going to keep going about this stuff. But it's all about that dialogue. It's not to say that Chris isn't wrong. We should have to watch the data. But are you getting that money back? We found ourselves in this position of, how are we talking about the data? What does it matter for you all, what we do, and how's that related? And this is the word that I come home on. Incorporate. So this is about Oxford Dictionary. Incorporate. Let's read this. To constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. So there's very little difference between our corporation and the city of Asheville, other than the fact that they're a publicly elected body and we're a real estate development entity. But they're both corporations, right? Y'all elect selectmen that run this corporation of Mashpee. It's not just the city, it's the county, it's the state. My city's worth $13 billion as a corporation. That's a taxable value. We're a $15 million investor in that. So my city, if we're in the Fortune 500, would be 6 times the value of Ted Turner. Does my mayor realize that? Would you expect Ted Turner to make all of his decisions about what he sees on Facebook that day? Of course not. What's the cash flow of this thing? How does it work? So Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert show. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. And so I'm such a nerd, I went and looked it up. Here it is, the U.S. title and code, if anybody is a legal nerd here. And it says that we are a federal corporation. It's got a balance. It's got a cash flow, right? I'm not saying it needs to be capitalistic. We need to understand the cash flow of this with some business principles. So my city is a finite boundary of land that has to be managed. Those acres are all that it has. We can't expand in our city. Our state has made it illegal for my city to annex anything, which is actually a good thing. But those acres are a crop. So if you anybody know a farmer, ever talk to a farmer about how a farmer looks at their farm? They're talking about economics. What's the crop yield per acre? What's the yield in the marketplace? How's the cash flow, right? The same is true of buildings. This is one of our buildings. We took this building and fixed it. This is the city's streetscape project. So thank you, city, for the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches, and a street tree. That's awesome. We made retail, office, and residential. So we took the taxable value from $300,000 to $11 million. So the taxes on that property shot up 3,500%. Is that a good return? Do y'all have a 401k plan that goes by 3,500%? So that's a community, that's the money that you get. Go out and buy 3,500 for some of our garbage cans, we don't care. And people are like, well, Joe, come on, man, that's not fair, that's $11 million. We've got this Walmart over here, $20 million. That Walmart pays $200,000 in taxes. This is my house, those are my dogs think they're lions. We're on a tenth of an acre, we pay $2,000 in taxes. So if a 1 acre cookie cutter fell from space and hit my neighborhood, each house paying $2,000, that's about $20,000 an acre in taxes. Y'all follow me? If you take that 1 acre cookie cutter, fly it in space, drive it over to the Walmart, divide its tax bill by the 34 acres of my corporation, this is what it's paying per acre in taxes. If you had an acre of our building downtown, this is what it's paying in taxes per acre. So if y'all could grow a crop, what would you grow? I was presenting this in California, and I want to make it really simple for them. I'm like, look, if you're in California, you're going to grow something, what are you going to grow? Everybody's like, well, Joe, come on, that's cute and everything, but we take the losses in property taxes to take the gains in retail taxes, which you all don't even get that much of. But when you look at the retail sales, Walmart sells $77 million, the city gets a portion of that, or about $47,000 an acre, add that to the property taxes. This is the total number. This is retail plus property taxes. This is just our property taxes. Now remember, we sell stuff here, let's add our retail taxes. Now you're cooking with gas, jobs, we've got jobs in our building. So when you stack it up side by side, you just get so much more stuff out of that versus this. And check this out. We got 90 units of residential per acre out of that building. Like, what train would you guys run me out of town on if I proposed a 90 unit acre building in somewhere around Mashpee? But is that building that bad? Built in 1924? So how do we talk about this stuff? What's good for our community and how do we yield that? You know, sometimes people are like, dude, what's your problem? Why do you hate Walmart? That's the wrong question, by the way. Chuck and I were presenting at the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers, like the assessors have their own organization. Is there an assessor in the room? 3,000 assessors. All due respect, not exactly the most dynamic conference I've ever been to. An assessors conference makes a planning conference feel like Burning Man by comparison. Lots of math. Crazy stuff, too. But this guy was presenting at 8 in the morning. The head of Walmart's property taxes, and was presenting spreadsheet after spreadsheet on how cheap his buildings are. Now, assessors are agnostic. Y'all are like, well, it's a cheap building. We can't make value out of that. It's a piece of junk.
I get it.
Depends on the dirt, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trained as an architect. I'm having a coronary in the back of the room because I'm like, wow, this is brilliant. He's getting all his property tax bills lowered for 3,000 different communities in one meeting. That's efficient. But the architect in me was like, how is he getting away with this? You know, it's real simple. If you tax on value, there's a perverse incentive to build junk in your community. The cheaper the building, the lower the taxes, period. Right? So I went up to the microphone and asked him, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? How long will it last? And he immediately shot back, 15 years. We designed that building on a quick depreciation cycle, maybe 20 years. It's more about the distribution system. We don't care about the building. So I don't hate the player. Just understand the game, right? That commitment to your corporation is 15 years, which is about the life cycle of a cat. At least more than the passing of the cat when the cat dies. But this is how our tax system works. There's other fun perversities built inside that. But just think about this for a moment about our tax system. So I breezed through a lot of information. I want you to realize this isn't complex math that I'm doing here. It's about productivity analysis. It's 5th grade division. We already do this when we talk about cars, right? Could you imagine if we're talking about cars and I'm like, hey, I got a pickup truck that gets 650 miles per tank. You'd be like, Joe, come on, that's stupid. Tanks are all different sizes. That's not about how we do productivity. We say miles per gallon, not miles per tank. Numbers just changed. Shall I be driving BMW Setas at 70 miles per gallon? Sorry to your Prius owners, this is more efficient. It's also very dangerous if you have a head on there. It's a cute little car. I'm making a joke here because I want you to understand productivity. and not necessarily the way that we typically ask the wrong question about real estate, which is overall valuation. So we've done this all across the country, a lot of different places, some places in New England, and it's real simple. For every dollar of county taxes, somebody out in the unincorporated county, which y'all don't have here, but in other places there are, every dollar of county taxes somebody paying out there pays to that county, the city dweller is paying about 5 times that. This is the Walmart, here's the mall, this is a 2-story building. This could be on Main Street in Barnstable, or Main Street Driggs, Idaho, or Main Street in Dallas. As soon as you start stacking stories, you see an exponential gain in wealth. This is a 6-story building, a 3-story building, and a 2-story building. It's real simple. When you stack those stories, you're stacking dollar bills. So we look at the city as like a system of layers. That I can show you your property taxes, your retail, can I show you these things the way that you go to a doctor and see the data? So let's go back to my county. This is the way, oops. This is the value per acre model, showing the non-taxables. This is the big park. We've got low value in green. We've got high value in purple. So this is how people typically talk about real estate. We've got low value in gray. This is the park. This is low value or non-taxable. This is low value in green. Purple is high value. This is the Biltmore estate right here. It's the big purple blob. The Biltmore estate's worth $100 million. So when Mr. Cecil, owner of the Biltmore estate, shows up at a council meeting, we all genuflect. This house is really worth a lot of money. But it's really not fair because his house is 180,000 square feet in one house. And it's sitting on 4,000 acres of land, so he's got the biggest gas tank, right? So of course it's going to be the most value. So rather than total value, let's do value per acre. The map just changed.
Wow.
And here it is in 3D. Can you all guess where downtown Asheville might possibly be? Boom. Right? We can see downtown Asheville. We can also see our little sister, Black Mountain, which is 9 miles away. We can see its Main Street popping up much like ours. Right? Now, with the defense of folks that are out in the county, and remember, our county legislator called us a cesspool of sin. They took our water system away from us. They've taken our airport away from us. We're at war with our county right now. But out here, out in Fairview, these folks think they're paying a lot of county taxes. And compared to their cousins out here in Hickory Nut Gap, they are. But what about us? So if we're all paying the same county taxation, the same millage rate, it's the same thickness of blanket across this entire model, where's the county getting the lion's share of its money? Right here, right? Y'all follow me? This is a relative model of productivity across the entire county, 350 square miles. And this is showing you where your valuation is. So, our city, I'm a county taxpayer and a city taxpayer. So, as a city, we're at 6% of the county, we're producing 41% of the county's property taxes. So that's a 1 to 7 ratio of productivity. So here's a question. Am I getting that level of service from the county in that footprint? Is the county picking up my trash and my garbage, or if I call the police, did the county show up? No. So that's money all hemorrhaged out. When you look at the downtown, inside the city, it barely shows up as a footprint, and it's 2% of the city's value. That's a 1 to 30, or the county's value. It's a 1 to 31 relationship for the county. So the county is making 31 times the productivity off every square inch of my downtown. This is fairly nerdy stuff. Are you guys all right? Sometimes I get a little excited about this stuff. So Rocklin, Maine, can you tell where downtown Rocklin, Maine is? And what's crazy is, this is all the new development that happened in the 60s and 70s right here. This is the Home Depot and the Walmart right there. And then you see the potency of what they've had for generations. So here's the Rocklin Plaza that was created in the 60s. This is the Home Depot and the Walmart, going about $500,000 an acre. You look at the old stuff, now we're starting at $3 million an acre. And again, remember, the Walmart's at $500,000, $4 million an acre. And there are horses in the picture. Like for 100 years, this stuff has been kicking out a tremendous amount of value. This is the big breadwinner, $17 million an acre, at this whopping skyscraper 4 stories right here. And so think about the wealth and your productivity before you talk about mass and architecture and everything else. So basically, their downtown Rocklin is 7 times the potency of the new development. If you had 1/8 of an acre of that, it would equal the 31-acre Rocklin Plaza. Connecticut, this is in Derby, Connecticut. Incidentally, by the way, all of these buildings have been torn down right here, and basically right there this way. But here you can still see what's left of downtown, what they haven't beat up. But they tore down a bunch of buildings and built a Home Depot right there. This is what they threw away to make that. So we pulled their history. This is the section that we worked on, and you can see what they tore out for the Home Depot. These three buildings are condemned on the chopping block to get rid of. They're not even occupied in the upper stories. They're pulling $6 million of value per acre. This is what's across the street from those buildings at $900,000 an acre. So they essentially threw away millions of dollars in their modernization. 0.1 acres of that guy would equal to 13 acre this. So why aren't communities building more of that? Retail sales and jobs. This is Durango, Colorado, middle of nowhere. This is the property taxes. You can see downtown. This is their suburban strip with the mall, the Home Depot, the Walmart, all of that. This is property taxes. Retail taxes matter a lot in Colorado, so we measured those too. Downtown's still winning. Total productivity, jobs. They had a couple of, infrastructure. How are we doing on time, by the way? You all right? Good, okay. So Chuck and I did this project in Lafayette, Louisiana together. And y'all know Lafayette, Louisiana, have been around Cajun people. Cajun people are kind of quirky. The mayor told us they were broke. It's really funny. His name is Joey Durrell. He owns a pet store. And he's like, Joe, people don't understand how broke we are. We need to show them how broke we are. We're broke. So we started digging into their books. I'm seriously not making this up. This is the cover of their budget document from 1994. Do you think the finance officer was sending a message about the state of affairs for the governor?
Sure.
This is they call it counties down there, parishes. So this is the parish. I love the onesie. About to get eaten by a shark and knocked out by a tsunami. Now, what do you think the elected officials did when faced with this impending doom? Kick the can down the road. The next year, the finance officer, to her credit, was like, hey, did I tell you how screwed up we are? And then the third year, they did this joint city-county government. Like, okay, now we realize we're broke, we need to get together and do something. And so here they are, 20 years later, and Chuck and I were asking them, like, what did you do to change your behavior? It only took you 20 years to basically capsize your city, too. They're broke. Did you just go to, like, Microsoft Clip Art and, like, fire the artists for the first years? So here's their tax model. Can you all spot downtown? Mm-hmm. Boom. This is their downtown, and this is their version of Mashpee Commons. This is called River Ranch. So new urbanism basically mimics the old stuff, and you see it in the valley, and they generally spread out into the swamps. Everybody wants to stretch out. This is America. So just measuring things like pavement, you saw Chuck's presentation. These are all their roads. Shoving them all together at 6.5 square miles of roads. This is the liability. That's the revenue. Right? So let me ask you a super complex municipal finance question. Do you have enough blue to pay for the red? So your liability is 18 times the red. But here's the scary thing. They're broke. So the first thing that they did is they started going after bonds. We're a municipality, we can go to the bond companies, we can get some cheap, low-interest money, that'll pay off our debt. Well, the bond companies don't care, they're like a credit card company, because they have first access to all of your revenues. So if they've already got bonds, the bond companies are already skimming off half of what they thought they had. They don't even see that. So if you thought you had $55 million for your $1 billion debt, you really don't, you only have $25 million. And that's the reality of their situation. It was really kind of scary to see their response. They're in this denial. One of their elected officials said this to us: it's not where you live, it's what you believe. I don't know what that means. I believe I'm Brad Pitt. Sooner or later, I've got to walk by a mirror, right? Yeah. So the public works director is hilarious. He said his response to this was this: there's no such thing as an infrastructure fairy. He said, look, we've got $300,000 for all of our road repaving. Y'all get to pick whichever quarter mile you want me to resurface, but that's it. So we had to Photoshop Kevin in on that one. And Kevin's like, just show it to me. So this is the whole city floating in the bay. Looking at the side view, what's below the water line is the sunk costs. In stormwater infrastructure, pipes, roads, and we sent everybody a bill. So you want to live out here? Great, this is what you're paying in taxes in green. This is what it costs for you to live where you live. So I run a business. I've got revenues that come in the door, I've got costs. My revenues have to exceed my costs. What's profit is what's in the black netted against the red, right? So here's the whole county in 3D. This is a cash flow model of an entire county. This is what it looks like. So taking this thing and slapping it on the floor so everything pops up vertically, this is what it looks like. So we can see who's net negative and who's net positive, right? That's the cash flow. Did y'all get this? They told us, they're like, well, people really want to live out there. I'm like, well, hell yeah. That's what you're paying them to move out there. They're not covering their costs. Just make sure you can afford that. And the scary thing is when you start digging into these numbers, you start to, all of your other biases start to go out the window. You can see the highway right here, that big white scar. That's a highway and a train track. There's a poor neighborhood on that side that's actually net positive. That's the reality of the data once you start asking those questions. And for colorblind people, this is what it looks like. So these aren't invisible market forces that are making the community behave this way. This is numbers that are baked into the system that are making the market behave a certain way. And we're all part of that system. So in 1950, they had about 34,000 people, 5 feet of pipe per person, 2.4 fire hydrants per thousand. They grew their population to 121,000 people. Their feet of pipe per person now is this. Their fire hydrants per thousand is this. A 350% growth in population, 1,000 and 2,000% growth in liability. And the whole time they told us how rich they were. You know, Joe and Chuck, we got oil money out of the Gulf, we're rich. So we can measure that too. Here's your household income adjusted for today's dollars. It grew by 160%. You grew your wealth by 160%, you grew your liability by 1,000 and 2,000%. How's that working out for you? So, yes, this is depressing, but these are the rules of math. We have to do the math on these places to understand this stuff. And this is a paradigm where we just kick the can down the road, hoping that some future generation is going to solve this problem. There are behavioral economics in all of this that tweak it. This is a Transylvania County, Brevard, North Carolina, town of 12,000 people, making different choices. This is their tax model. Can you guess where downtown Brevard is? And when the mayor saw this, he's like, well, we have this huge infrastructure problem where they have combined water and sewer, and the EPA is shutting them down until they fix their water system. They've got to figure out how to pay for it. And they asked a smart question. When they saw this mountain coming out of the tallest building is 3 stories tall, they thought, well, not all taxes are equal. We need to be fair with the stormwater. This is their tax model. Here's your stormwater model. So they saw that, indeed, the downtown is also impervious. If you go just 2 blocks away down here, you'll see impervious buildings. You'll also see impervious parking lots. The parking lots are also impervious. So this is the tax model coming through the impervious surface model. This is the side view of the mountain range of taxes. Here's downtown. Here's the impervious surface model. So we can see that downtown is actually net positive, and then you have this net negative where it's really bad over here. This is the Kmart. So you get very little taxes, you get this high impervious surface. So this is a town of 12,000 people, and they're figuring out how to, that's not good for them. This is good. So how do we do more of the good and less of the bad? And they're using the math of all of this stuff to do that. So, okay. Some of you all might be wondering, Joe, you just don't understand who we are. This is what America is. We've got lots of land. This is just who we are and how we're growing. So what if I could bring you the ghost of Christmas future? A county that's just 100% done whatever they wanted and grown their way out in the American way. We got it in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Do y'all know Gwinnett County, Georgia? Lawrenceville is the county seat. I had never heard of Lawrenceville. And it was kind of funny. That was under strict orders when I went there. I wasn't allowed to say 4 words. There were 30 words in Gwinnett County. I couldn't say the word urban, city, town, or municipal. They're like, Joe, you don't understand who we are. We're rural. We're not part of the big city. We're not part of Atlanta. We're outside the Beltway here. We're a rural county. Here's the Beltway, there's Atlanta. Now, what's mind-blowing is there are 812,000 people in Gwinnett County. So I called up the client, who's a Chamber of Commerce, and I said, Kelly, y'all are 812,000 people. She goes, I know, honey, we're 460 square miles. We're huge. All right. I can do math. When you divide 800,000 into 460, it's 1,800 people per square mile. That's density. This is DeKalb, which has a piece of Atlanta in it. It's got Decatur. It's more dense than Gwinnett County. So I was presenting to them that night, and I put this data up. And I said, look, y'all are 200 people denser in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. What's in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina? Charlotte. Y'all have heard Charlotte, right? This is Davidson County, Tennessee. You're 600 people denser than Davidson County, Tennessee. What's in Davidson, Tennessee? Nashville. So y'all are denser than these two places. They both have a professional football team. There's no such thing as the Gwinnett County Cowboys. So what's up with that? This is Austin. You're double the density of Austin, Raleigh, Asheville. That's Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
One other little facet. The state of New Jersey. We all think of it as a big urban state. What is the average population of the state of New Jersey? 914 people per square mile.
Okay, so somewhere around Raleigh. Yeah. So this is their model, their tax model. When Josh was doing the model, I was like, what's up with that? It's just like this big yellow kind of paste. I said, could you turn that on its side? So by the way, that's the last farm right there. They basically did monolithic sprawl across the whole thing. It looks like a 1970s shag carpet. It's like the same thing straight across the model. The reason why we were freaked out is this is what we usually see. This is Orange County, North Carolina, and I could see 3 different municipalities, and I could see Main Street, Main Street, Main Street, New Urbanism right there in the model. So I asked them, I'm like, how do you do this? This is mind-blowing to me. So this is the most potent building in the entire county at $8 million an acre that your great-grandparents left you. And all of these places are less dense and producing more wealth. So is it density that you're after? Is this the problem? Do you understand what questions you're asking? So just to rope it in, we made an economic heart monitor, and we put the 3 counties of Davidson, Travis, and Gwinnett County at the same scale, and we pulsed them out. Like, all right, there you go. So we've got a peak value of 192 million in Davidson, 476 million in Austin, and y'all are flatlining in Lawrenceville. This is what you've built in your community as your long-term wealth. How's this working out for you? You have all of the same horizontal infrastructure as these places, and none of the wealth to pay for it. Are you guys going broke yet? And they're like, oh yeah, we're broke. Go figure. So this is the pattern that we build into our communities. I'm going to skip ahead. Running out of time here.
So can I ask you a question?
Sure, yeah.
So where do you think Nashville would fall on that scale?
You all are 600 people per square mile of density. So you're above Chapel Hill. Chapel Hill is less dense than you guys are.
So in terms of the valley, where would
Oh, I don't
that
know.
be?
I don't think you're anywhere near Chapel Hill, I'll tell you that, because Chapel Hill's got 6-story buildings. So I think Chapel Hill's peak value is about 50 million an acre. Chapel Hill's actually got more value than Asheville in it. But the thing is, like, I think these buildings down here are probably the closest thing you're going to get to that productivity. But y'all, from a density standpoint, are somewhere between Wake County and Asheville. You're actually denser than Asheville. That's the reality. So this is Redlands, California, suburb of Los Angeles. I asked the community, I'm like, what's that big purple spike right there? Everybody in the community responded it was this building. This is the tallest building in town. That's their skyscraper. They had $6 million in value per acre. The actual most potent building in that town, that purple spike, is actually this guy. At 21, I mean, don't believe your eyes when you look at your community. Do the data, do the math, see what's going on, and make decisions based on that. This little building right there, that, creatively named the shoe shop, right there, shoe repair is pulling $4.4 million of value per acre. 3 acres of that thing would equal a 13-acre Walmart. Like, what ringer would you run me through to get that thing built? What zoning code would you throw at me to stop me? But yet that's producing wealth. Is it that hard to start an entrepreneurial business? But they did a downtown mall in the 70s, so we went ahead and went back in time and brought back the buildings off the Sanborn map. That's what they tore down to make the downtown mall. The downtown mall is now on its way out. So there's the downtown mall. It's $6 million of value per acre. Here's what they threw away. So they essentially threw away $15 million of wealth to create that. What were we thinking? And oftentimes we weren't. It's not these people were nefarious or had some evil plot. They were just, this is the way that we thought. We're modernizing, we're going forward. They're not thinking about what they're doing. They're not thinking about those lost examples. So, hey, if you want to make America great again, this is the way to do it. You know, just, we've got these lessons. You can laugh. One last example is Charleston. This is Old Town Charleston. This is the value of the beach. And we told them, like, well, you know what? God made the beach, y'all did. That's the beachfront real estate. This is what humans make, so let's create the beach. And now we can see how to create value and density. I'm a big fan of taxes, if you haven't figured this out by now. This is actually one of my favorite colonial barbs. Don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax the fellow behind the tree. We are a country that was formed on a tax revolt. That building that's behind you is actually where the redcoats imprisoned the Charlestonians. So at the same time they were going through this stuff up here in New England, they were doing the same thing down in Charleston. So we went ahead and pulled all the buildings that predate the United States. Every building in Charleston is older than that birth date right there, right? You know the date. Here are the buildings, built in 1686. This is the oldest liquor store in the entire United States. That's clearly a revolutionary getting his drink on right there. These are all the buildings that predate the Declaration of Independence. Here they are in plan. So those buildings, 21 acres of those buildings that are left from colonial America, paid the county in county taxes $630,000 in county property taxes. Now mind you, they're paying a city tax and a business improvement district tax on top of that. This is just what the county got as a check. Out in the county, there's a Walmart, same acreage. This is what it paid the same year. 240 years. And remember what I told you, this building's going to be gone by 2020. Right? 240 years these buildings have survived fires, hurricanes, half a dozen wars, an earthquake, and they're still contributing this wealth. They haven't always been wonderful. There's been some downtowns in Charleston, but they've had this ability to come back for wealth. This is what that density and value produces over time. So, just to close, you know, I kind of miss this guy now. It's kind of scary, but he said this, and it's really got it close. We're really addicted to something else. It's not the oil. We're addicted to a pattern of development. We're addicted to something that feels good to stretch out. I don't have a neighbor walking above my head. I got a big yard for my dog. But there's a cost to that pattern that we're not recouping. There's math that we're not doing. And we're not the first people to do this. If you actually pull the Nixon administration in 1973 published this document, look at the title of it, The Cost of Sprawl. We have the data and math to do this stuff. We're just not applying it. So all this stuff is brought to us by public policy. We like to refer to this as geoaccounting. We're just putting the data on a map so y'all can see it. And like any accountant, your accountant doesn't care if you buy a boat, right? Your accountant cares if you can afford a boat. So do the math, figure out whether you can be net positive. Realize our country is formed by a tax revolt, folks. We need to be literate about this stuff, about how our taxation works. So Asheville, at $13 billion, is worth more than all of your professional sports teams combined. Did you know that? Or we're about 7.1 pats. I can guarantee you that Mr. Kraft knows Tom Brady's towel bill. I can tell you that cups in our nightclub cost 5 cents a pop. Because we have to stay in business. Do y'all know how much a mile of pipe costs? What's it cost to plow a mile of your roads? Y'all are shareholders in this corporation. So this morning we had a conversation, and your town manager got me the numbers, so we went ahead and put it out there. Y'all are $5 billion of value. Y'all are almost 3 packs. More of you can probably tell me how many touchdowns Tom Brady threw last year than what a cost of roads are. That's crazy. You're shareholders in this. And I don't put a lot of words in my presentation, but let's go ahead and read this one. You know, the fundamental issue is that inefficient use of land costs more than the efficient use of land. Simply put, you buy more stuff and it costs more to maintain. That's a very simple rule to remember. We have to understand this stuff. You need to do your math. Thanks.
Well, I have a question. We've spent a lot of time in the region over the last 5 or 6 years talking about wastewater. So one of the sort of financial realities of wastewater that we dealt with was to figure out what an affordable cost per pound of nitrogen removed was in a community. So we came up with about $400 per pound. Was that point at which you could probably sell the total cost of that to a community? But we found out that in order for that to happen, your average point between two connections had to be 150 feet or less. And so that really sort of informed a lot of discussions about wastewater affordability, and how viable the expansion of conventional sewer systems would be on a place like the Cape, where we already have a sprawl, and how unaffordable it's been to try to solve the wastewater problem that way, the conventional. And that sort of informed the Cape Cod Commission at the time the way that we think about smart growth and development. And so one of the things that I was really pushing pretty hard prior to my departure a couple of years ago was the ability to do spatial fiscal impact models, rather than just those blank fiscal impact models that said, you know, a generic square footage of a generic use in your town is going to cost you this much for these services. How do we break it up by parcel? So the equations that you use up there, is that kind of a person use?
Yeah. Yeah, we spent a year. Well, the first thing that we did was we interrogated everybody, every department head in city government.
In
Lafayette. Anybody, any finance officers in the room? We were talking about this morning. We sat down with the finance officer, and one of the things that municipal budgets have is that your road infrastructure is held in an asset ledger. So they have 3 ledgers in municipal finance: your revenue, your expenses, and your asset ledger. So that computer is owned by my company. That's an asset that depreciates, right? So Chuck was asking about why are roads in the asset ledger, and the finance officer said, well, that's part of our CAFR standard. So they have this rule that she's following. And Chuck's asking, well, you have to maintain those. And she goes, yeah, but our CAFR standards, that's what we do. And I held up my computer, and I asked Lori, I said, look, Lori, that computer depreciates, but at the end of the day, I can sell that computer to Chuck. Can you pick your roads up, and can you sell them to Barnstable? Or in her case, Baton Rouge. And she goes, well, no. And Chuck's like, that's a liability. She's like, what about our CAFR standards? So what we did is we told her, we're not following your CAFR standards, we're going to follow how you actually behave. And so we sent everybody a bill, we did a lot of complex math, because we wanted to be true to how people actually use the city.
I think too, you know, I was thinking a little bit about your sewer system. To me, I say, you know, you have to respect the fact that cities are complex, dynamic systems. And I've actually been involved with the sizing of wastewater facilities. And the way we go about it is completely inadequate. Because we do it the way that you've described. And I'm not saying you're inadequate, I'm saying the process we use. So we sit down and we say, okay, here's how many people we have. Here's what we project our growth to be. Here's what that means we need to size it for. And then where do we find the money to do that? And when you get to that next step, like how do we find the money to do it, then you say, okay, we can't afford that here. And so we need to go to the legislature and lobby for some money. We need them to do some bonding for us. We need a federal grant. We're a rural area, maybe we can get a USDA grant. And really smart people, engineers are very smart people, city finance people are very smart people, they start putting together a project. And what you've done is you've started with like the need. Here's the need we have, and then build the project. Then you get into the situation I described, where 30 years later you're like, oh my gosh, we can't even maintain like 2 miles of this, and we've got 20 miles of it. What do we do? To me, I'm not going to solve the problem for you. I'll give you some ideas if you want to hear them later. But I think this question, you need to ask it a little bit differently. You need to say, okay, go through the first iteration. Here's how much we're going to treat, here's how many people we have, here's our projection. Then say, okay, based on this dollar amount, how many people do we have to have? Like, how many homes do we have to have? How much taxes do we need? How much wealth do we have to create? How many connections do we need to actually make this affordable? Then what you will get is a huge number. Then you say, okay, if we're going to treat that, What's the size of that facility? Do you see there's an iterative part here? And you get to the end, you'll get an actual number that will blow your mind. Will not, I mean, right now the numbers blow your mind. And I'm saying, like, you will get to a point where it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
So the number that caused me a little bit of concern earlier was when it was referred to as a non-starter as far as the elephant in the room, wastewater. I wish we were putting down pipe at the same time we were putting down those hydrants, but at any rate, the reality of it is we spend about $58 million to run this town on a yearly basis. That includes everything, from your schools, the police, the fire, the DPW, and all of the services in between. And what we've attempted to do is make sure that your mission-critical services are preserved, and we don't just add personnel upon request. We evaluate it as a necessity, and we also make sure that it's affordable and sustainable long-term. The finance team has done a fabulous job in regards to the 10-year forecast. What is the 10-year forecast? The assessor, who's in the room, the finance director, treasurer, have assembled data, and I know this guy next to me loves data because he was stumping me earlier. And we take the data and we analyze it and we carefully say, okay, when are we at that point where the lines cross? And it's only a projection. I don't want to scare anyone right now. But 2021, 2022, thereabouts, we're probably going to be at a point where we will need an override in order to maintain local services, as you have come to expect them. So, you're all smart. It's simple. Either we increase taxes, we reduce services, or we enhance revenue. And I don't necessarily want to sit here and advocate, and I would never advocate, or I would really be tarred and feathered, developing every spot of land in this community. But what I do want everyone to do is to think about smart growth and how do we make sure that there is a balance, and make sure that when you're smiling, Tom, make sure. I know, I'm getting there. He's a sewer commissioner now. We're going to reach the point where we've got to address the elephant in the room, which is wastewater. So we can't say no to all of the options that are out there on the table, that are feasible, that are worthy of consideration. I'm not sitting here and saying you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. But what we all have to do collectively is take this as a community issue for the sake of identifying our priorities and putting them in perspective and deciding how do we march forward together without devastating the local services that we've come to expect and appreciate. The majority of which are made up of what? Our personnel. In most communities, and I don't know if your data supports this, I mean, I'm guessing personnel costs are anywhere from 80 to 85%, possibly a little less, a little more. And when you start breaking down the numbers, we want to remain competitive as far as contractual agreements are concerned, but at the same time, we also don't want to get into a situation where it is not sustainable. So all I'm saying is keep all of the options open, think about them carefully, and evaluate information, which is very helpful like tonight, and go forward.
Question?
I want to just say one quick thing, just very quick. You made a statement now about raising taxes and cutting services, and then you said, I'm not interested in developing the entire city. And I get,
town.
the entire town, and I get the point.
And I chastised them about Walmart.
I get the point, and I understand. Let me make this so we're all clear. If the consensus was to develop the entire town as a way to pay for things, you would go broke quicker, right? It's not, I hope that the takeaway that everyone grasps here is it's not, do we want development, yes or no? It's like, do we continue with the style of development that we have now? That is what is bankrupting.
And I didn't want to imply that that's what he was advocating
Right.
at any point,
Right.
either this morning or just now. Because actually, I must say, from the town's perspective, or at least from my perspective, professional perspective, the town of Mashpee and the Commons have been wonderful partners. I have really appreciated working with them. They've been very informative throughout this entire process. I can't thank them enough for being very attentive to detail and providing us with anything that we've ever needed. And no matter what side you're on, no matter what questions you may have, I really salute Bob Chase and his team for settling a lot of facts and figures that the town really appreciates.
I just want to say one thing. I appreciate that you're looking into the end road is that our resources are limited here on the Cape in Mashpee, that what to do with our wastewater, for one thing. I know that our bays out there, when I was a kid, they produced what would amount to millions of dollars worth of shellfish, but they don't produce hardly anything right now. The scallops which could feed a lot of people, put up a lot of people's revenue in a lot of people's pockets. It doesn't happen anymore. I'm looking at concentrating our wealth and concentrating our building in this one area here. How do we protect our resources and bring our resources back that would produce wealth if we weren't just destroying them with all this infrastructure? What are we going to do to protect our bays and our woods and our areas? I can see concentrating things into smaller areas, but there's also going to be a concentrated outflow of economic bad. There's also going to be a concentrated use of our limited resources of clean water. So I'm wondering at what point we make that cross, and we cross that point. So I don't want to cross into that that point where we don't have anything left, because
When we started doing this, in Asheville, I did a beer party with friends and tell them that I do downtown development, and they'd say to me, like, "You're a scumbag." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, do you live in the bush? Like, somebody built your house. You hang out in our nightclub, you go to our bars, and I see you there.
Yeah.
And those wouldn't be there if it weren't for us." But we had to deal with this level of cognitive dissonance about what cities were inside Asheville. And it was basically like, pull up the drawbridges, I'm here, and no one else can be here. There'd be chat room fights over whoever was the most recent transplant to Asheville. And it's just really weird the way that we had our conversation. The reason why we stepped out and started bringing data out is because we're just trying to fix what was there. And there are people on the right that thought downtown was subsidized, and we were just some rapacious developers, and people on the left that thought all development was equal. And we saw this really weird, irrational conversation, and we're just like, let's put the data out there. This PowerPoint that you guys just got pummeled with, my side of it, that was 150 slides.
Yeah.
And I used to do like 400 slideshows of the environmental and economic case for the urban environment. And there would be the whole environmental side to it that you could actually run costs to. And those are all the great questions that you're asking. There is a transference of that loss of Mother Nature. Y'all are being hit by lots of macro environmental forces that you can't control at this point. You're seeing this with the hurricanes and everything else that you guys are getting hit with the tidal changes. But you're all, I hate to say it, part of that problem. You know, so in the case of Asheville, it's like, well, if I can reduce my VMT, if I can walk to work, or bicycle to work, or try to make our environment contract some of that and do my effort toward that, then I'm gonna do that. So are we having that conversation, are we running the numbers, and knowing all those other costs? But all those road, that improved surface that gets out to your house somewhere, that's a lot of runoff along the way. You know, we went down 130 we're staying in Sandwich on the way here. We're, jokingly counting this is the kind of nerds we are, we're counting the fire hydrants the whole way. But Chuck's also pointing out the granite curves, the stormwater runoff, all that's causing, yeah, all that's just going straight out into the bay.
I think too, I'd like to add 2 points of context with the environmental conversation too. And I'm here to share ideas with you. I'm not necessarily here to make you feel good about yourselves. So I'll say this, and I'm going to do my Minnesota apology ahead of time. If you think of 2 conditions as being the least impactful for the environment, the one is wilderness, untouched, unspoiled wilderness. And the other one is all the development concentrated into one tiny spot where there is the wealth and the capacity to actually manage the environmental impact. Okay? The further those are 2 ends of the spectrum. The further you get away from the ends of the spectrum, the deeper the environmental impact becomes with the development. You essentially sit right in the middle. You have like the least productive, most environmentally impactful development pattern. That's what you have here. And I don't say that to ridicule you in any way. Just maybe point out a little bit of the cognitive dissonance between what your heart is telling you and what you have actually done. I also want to point out one thing, and this is hard for us to get our minds around. If we go to Detroit today, a place that is absolutely broke, a place that is really, in all practical purposes, 2 or 3 decades ahead of every other city in America. They got started building this pattern earlier. They reached the logical destination of this approach earlier. They went broke before all of us did. We're all on the same trajectory. Nobody in Detroit really cares about the environment very much. I'm not saying they don't care about it. I'm just saying when you can't pay your bills, when you can't call the fire department and have them show up in less than 45 minutes, nobody's really worried about nitrate loadings. So in a sense, if we care deeply about the environment, we actually have to take care of the economics and solvency of our place, or we won't have the capacity to actually do those things we care about.
So what is Mashpee's vision for the future? Not here, not this particular development. What is the town of Mashpee's vision for the future? Has it been articulated?
In terms of this particular plan, or
No,
in terms of
wastewater? Everything, the town.
Paul's more qualified to answer this than me, but I would like to optimistically think that at some point down the road, the state and the federal government will assist Cape Cod, because this isn't a Mashpee problem. I know Chatham is a little ahead of things, and he's more qualified to get into this than I am. But I just feel that it's a regional issue that will require regional collaboration in order to get it done to the extent that it needs to be.
Can I restate that in an outsider's term before you do? So I'm going to restate that in an outsider's term. Understanding that we went through some of the poorer neighborhoods of Boston yesterday, I'm very intimately familiar with Springfield, Massachusetts, where I've spent a lot of time. Incredibly poor city, devastatingly poor city in your state. And I'm here looking at some of the most affluent properties in really all of North America. And here's I'm going to restate what you said. I hope that the taxpayers of the United States, largely which are much poorer than we are, and the taxpayers of Massachusetts, largely which places are struggling more than us, would look at our very inefficient and expensive development pattern and choose to spend a lot of money bailing us out. That's why you're
putting words in my mouth.
No, I'm not. I'm restating what you just said in a different perspective.
What is the problem problem in Mashpee right now? I mean.
Sorry to,
What do we see in the basis?
I want to give you an opportunity to state what
That's
you
people
were.
want to know.
Well, yeah, I would
Okay,
say,
somebody,
you know, some of the,
Give us some.
from states like Massachusetts, a lot of federal tax laws that are raised here go to places like Arkansas. So I don't feel bad about asking if that's because it, you know, it comes out in the wash for a little bit there. That's the political aspect of it. The real issue is an environmental issue we've got to deal with. We know, based on a lawsuit that was pending, how much nitrogen we need to remove in order to meet water quality standards. So that's not a made-up number, that's what we're geared towards. The first thing that we try to do is don't build what you don't need, right? Don't overbuild the solution. And so half of the people on the Cape now can stay on the existing septic systems, and we can still solve the problem. And that's not just using traditional conventional systems everywhere else, it's using other alternatives. As it relates to sort of the Cape and some of the other peculiarities of the Cape economy, Cape Cod is still primarily a seasonal economy. But as a subset of that, we're really a second home. 35% of all the households on the Cape, all the homes on the Cape, built on the Cape, are second homes. And that ranges from a high of 71% in Truro to a low of 17% in Sandwich. The majority of those homes are on the coast. And they're owned by people that have enough disposable income to have a second home on the beach in New Seabrook. Right? So one of the things you might want to consider on the revenue side is to split those taxes. Because the existence of those homes that might only be occupied 4 to 10 weeks a year, in a wastewater context, you have to build for peak flow, even if it only happens 4 weeks out of the year. So when we build conventional systems on the Cape, we are clearly overbuilding those systems. So you might want to consider shifting some of those costs onto the base that's really driving those costs up, which would be second homeowners. And that's not popular to talk about, but that's one of the options you're going to have to consider moving forward. The other thing too is if you look at Chatham, and found that two communities that are moving forward with some of their wastewater proposals, they've done it by just being good at budgeting and being good at capital budgeting primarily and retiring debt service in anticipation of taking on additional debt service for wastewater. But they're making decisions in those towns to shift those capital resources from building schools to building wastewater systems because there's a finite amount of money. But half of the money, at least, to solve the problem by building infrastructure to remove nitrogen is going to come from the towns. So you're going to have to make difficult decisions, but they're not impossible decisions. There's no one silver bullet. But as long as we agree on what the performance measures are for anything, and we're using data to create performance measures, and we're checking in at the right time to make sure that we're on the right path, we can get there. That's why the commission, after the wastewater discussion is done, don't build it, don't sprawl, don't do more greenfield development. I mean, we do not need to build one more freestanding single-family home on the Cape. That's just the reality of it. The other reality is we're not going to undevelop any of those yet. So we have to sort of get to some form of stasis here. And we're moving in that direction, and I think we've made some progress, at least on the planning side. And I'm confident that we'll be able to solve it, but it's not going to be a big check from federal government or state government. Most of it's going to come from local governments, and it's going to force you to take a long, hard look at what you're doing in your communities. But one of the things communities have to do is they have to grow. Like when communities stop growing, they start dying, and they just get frozen. If you look around the Cape, you're going to find different areas that people think are quaint, but they're basically historic frozen museums. That used to be main streets, but once you start to see real estate offices opening up there, they're no longer functioning main streets. The direct windows are gone, hot trucks gone. So, we can't have a lot of that. You start to lose money there too. You need in it to find activity centers in your town. You have existing infrastructure, or you're planning existing infrastructure, and you've got to build density there, and you've got to go up. Right? Because the one thing that's absolutely clear on the Cape is we have one of the most homogeneous sort of building stocks on the planet. Everything is detached, single family, one story, clad in gray shingles. That's it. We've got to go vertical because vertical makes more sense, especially where we already have some existing infrastructure. Financing wastewater, the more usage you can get on a short length of pipe, the more cost-effective that system is going to be long term. We have the numbers, we can develop performance measures to make sure that any plan development that comes in is measured against that, right? For too long, especially on the Cape, what you have is individual property owners that have a financial interest in developing their individual property. And it's easy to make government the bad guy when you go to the planning board, the ZBA, and say, oh, this is my property, I'll be able to do whatever I want to do with it. And the community never shows up because there's a balance, there's a debate between individual property rights and community rights. And the community rights are losing because it's too easy for speculative development by individual property owners to demonize government, which is the protector of those community rights. So there's a lot that's been going on that stopped good development.
Can you just tell us what this lady here said, what is our vision? What should our vision be in order to solve the economic issues that we are suggesting?
I have a Polish proverb hanging in the wall in my office, and it translates to "not my circus, not my monkeys." And I tell communities, I'm like, look, this is your problem to solve. We're out of here tomorrow. And we want you to basically wake up a little bit. And not say things like we need to kick the can down the road, and rather kind of paraphrase of it's too difficult for us to change behavior that we hear. And I think
Not from me.
Not from you. It's offensive. In Detroit, they're actually talking about moving people to collapse the city. In Lafayette, we told them, we said, take 10% of your roads and let them revert to dirt. Sorry, we're just not going to get paid. 12% of your roads are cul-de-sacs. Send that bill to the people living at the end of the cul-de-sac. There's no reason that's not part of the entire road network. The community shouldn't pick up that burden. Those are incredibly difficult decisions for those places to wrestle with. Maine has a whole statewide revert to dirt policy. These are not easy solutions. This is not going to be a simple discussion. Can you have it if collapsing your community is what's obligated and required of you from the environmental standpoint as well as a cost standpoint? Is that a program that you could develop from a community standpoint? Can we all just let's make a community-wide sacrifice that we all need to change our pattern a little bit? I mean, these are all conversations that you all need to have beyond us. Now, what that plan looks like for the future, I don't know. Could you find a community that is living in kind of a stasis with the environment? I'm thinking like a Himalayan village, or an Italian hill town that's completely surrounded by farms and that food source that feeds the village. Pienza, Italy is 2,000 people that can fit in a Walmart parking lot. It's 2,000. It's 2,000 people. So you're 12,000 people. It's funny that the village of Brevard, they actually call themselves the city of Brevard. They're the exact same population you are. Don't let your biases get in the way. Think about what you can aspire to be and how you're going to function economically. But just have to wrestle with this whole, we all have habits. I'm Italian. I had a cheeseburger yesterday with Chuck. Shouldn't have done that. I had a salad today. It's like these are things that I'm constantly iterating and wrestling. I also know I'm going to have bad habits. I'm not gonna take myself out in the parking lot and put a bullet in my head because I had a cheeseburger. I'm not gonna self-flagellate. I'm gonna realize, okay, now I need to adjust for that. So don't just feel overly guilty about it. Sometimes I feel bad when I do those presentations because I see the looks on your faces when I'm presenting the data, and I feel guilty for doing this to you. I just wanted to see the information for a second and realize that we all have conversations and habits. But that's just my answer.
I think too, you have, at the end of the day, you have a math problem. You have not enough productivity for the level of lifestyle, essentially, that you've created. And I think you can think of your roads and your water system and your potential sewer system and the environmental impact and all that as a lifestyle. So in a sense, you have to reduce your lifestyle or increase your productivity. And it's a really, it's that simple of a math problem, really. And, I think the first question I was asking is like, where's your most productive type of land? And we looked around, we got the tour today of the commons. It is, just by my impression, incredibly productive land use. It also does not have that great of an environmental impact because you're treating the sewage, you're handling the stormwater runoff. So to me, I look at those miles of pipe serving, one home every 200 feet, and I'm like, and everything that you've told me is a priority to you today, that is like the absolute last thing you should be doing. Building up this place here would be like the top of the list for me.
And I just also want to add, in case it's not aware of this, as far as Mashpee Commons is concerned, we don't maintain the sidewalks, we don't maintain the roads. They plow, they clear the sidewalks themselves. And a lot of people don't notice that, so I'm just throwing it out there.
I wanted to raise another point, which is, I think the thing that we haven't addressed tonight is what the woman was just talking about with the water and wastewater and the concern about that. I think what you said was we can't address those issues unless we create the wealth that we need to pay for it. So I think that's what you guys are saying. We need to really focus on how we create the dollars in the community in order to do
I agree.
that.
I'm actually very sympathetic to the point you made. I work with many, many cities, lake communities in Minnesota. Minnesota, we have 10,000 lakes? No, we have like 13,500 some lakes. We have a lot of lakes, and developing around the shoreline is what a lot of people very much like to do. And the thing is, you put houses every 50 to 100 feet around the shoreline, and you put them all in septic tanks, they sometimes destroy the lake, the very thing that brought them. Providing them sewer, centralized sewer, bringing it back, is something that a lot of cities have tried to do. They've gone and gotten federal grants for it, they've gotten state help for it, they put it in, what they
Federal
found.
grants?
Yes, and what they found is that a generation later, it craters them, because they don't have the wealth to actually take care of it. I've worked with many, many cities that have, in the urgent phase that you are in now, actually gone out and said, the first thing we can do is take care of ourselves. And started routine inspection programs. The state in Minnesota says, you've got to have it inspected when you sell it. And the inspection has to be within the last 3 years. And so I worked with one city, we set up a city-wide thing where we tested them every 3 years. We went out and we said, property owner, you can hire your own inspector, but you've got to go out and get it tested, and every 3 years demonstrate that it's up to speed. The first year of those, we got like 15% of them were just cesspools with, pouring sewage straight into the lake or straight into the ground. So to me, you can start to now take proactive steps yourselves to make the situation better, as opposed to waiting for some grand solution, if you are inclined. I think that that's a matter of internally where your values and your priorities are.
There are behavior methods. There are behavior methods you can start going through. There's a book I recommend to most audiences. It's called Nudge by Richard Thayer, who just won a Nobel Prize in Behavioral Economics last year. It's not going to be silver bullets. It's not going to be any big thing. It's going to be a lot of little things. For me, and going back to that first picture of my parents, every Minnecosi man in the history that I know has had a heart attack by the time they're 60. When my dad was going in for his bypass surgery, he got a 7 bypass surgery. What do you call that, a septuple?
Yeah.
Now, we're all Italian, so we're like yelling at him on the way in, like, look at you, you're fat. That's what we're doing as he's going into the hospital. And that's our way of showing love. And when the doctor pulled me and my 2 brothers aside and just pointed in our face and said, that's in you, that was my wake-up call.
Right, but I could ban exercise on my lawn, but I would say, I don't know organic, I'm not gonna do that. But if people aren't gonna do that on occasion unless there's, I don't know.
So I think it's probably clear to you at this point that groundwater and water quality is a major issue here in the state for way of life and also for development. And I think as well, framed it, that the creation of wealth, allows us to solve one of those problems. And I think as your numbers demonstrated, density allows for that creation of wealth. The other major issue, another major issue you're going to get, it's not been brought up tonight, is the affordability of workforce housing. And I wonder if, in any of the studies you did, you demonstrated a correlation, by going higher, as Paul described, and by concentrating density, what positive impacts that had on the affordability of housing as well.
Well, there's lots of variables. I didn't put it into this part of the presentation, but we were in Palm Beach County, Florida, which is where Donald Trump has all of his real estate. This is before he became president. We just thought it'd be cute to grab all of the Donald's real estate. The Donald is pulling about $600,000, or sorry, $400,000 of value per acre. Just for curiosity's sake, I used to be a zoning administrator, so I went into the poorest neighborhood in West Palm Beach, and that's pulling $600,000 of value per acre. And those are one-story buildings. Run down, shotgun shacks. And we saw this in Lafayette, Louisiana. It's just that there are perversities built in the system that dilute your productivity. And it's not to say, if I put you all in the car and drove you through this neighborhood, it's one of the worst neighborhoods I've ever seen. I used to get warned by the police department when I went there for zoning stuff. And it was just, it's just poverty and desperate wealth in Palm Beach County. So I think that there are biases we need to check to the curb a little bit. It's not necessarily saying you're diluting the revenue or value with that typology of development. So just be aware of that. Your first question?
I also think the main, in communities like this, where you don't have like pockets of poverty that need to be raised up, the number one driver of housing costs and affordability is just the time that it takes to develop, but it's the time it takes to actually meet the market demand. If you have to hold a property for 3 or 4 years where you can get a permit to build something on it, what you've done right now is you said the only people who can develop are people with huge sums of money. And the only people that can develop are people who are going to develop in like big ways. And it's not going to be, unless it's got some huge subsidy, it's not going to be affordable. The only way you deal with affordable housing in that instance is to make your permitting process more streamlined and quick. And that doesn't mean big, it means what I talked about earlier, incremental. If we can build small and incremental across a broad frame, you can start to have affordable housing at scale.
In Asheville, we have ADUs, dwelling units that people can build in their backyard that are almost instantaneously permitted. A very predictable process. We went through the planning process of basically making it real for people to see what it looks like and it's an affect through zoning. And then it's really easy for people to do that. They can build their own wealth in their community. I can build a little unit in my backyard and get a rental stream, but it's also going to be an affordable unit. Now there is the whole Airbnb fight that happens as well, but there are other cities that have been down this path before you. But there's lots of externalities. If you end up pushing your affordable dweller out of your community, your school teacher, the person that works in the restaurant, all the coffee shop, all of that, that's an externalized cost on that individual that makes its way back in other forms, like traffic, that bridges, higher costs.
It's a big circle. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Paul or Ron, you guys have a parting thought?
I would just want to close with, just point out one study we did at the commission a few years ago, just take a look at all of Cape Cod, all of the existing zoning, and to look at if we built out everything that we could under existing zoning, what would happen. And what you get is broad sprawl and an additional 30,000 people. That absolutely will make an impossible situation, unsolvable at any point. So what we did is we took those same 30,000 units and we crushed those 30,000 people, right, into historic economic centers that already have existing infrastructure, already have buildings, and we sort of amplified the design of those buildings, we put it there. And what you saw is, instead of this huge gap between housing at the affordable side and $350,000 $400,000 break into the market, You saw housing costs come down. You saw the number of jobs increase, the average wage increase to the point that the wages that were paid could get you into entry-level housing. So that's what the communities have to do, is to develop activity centers in places where they can grow, where they will develop the wealth and be able to deal with some of the other issues that are environmental and housing. It's all about better design. But if we continue to sprawl along, we're going to make it worse. As it relates to regulatory streamlining, at the Cape Cod Commission 5 years ago, we took a company called Hydroid and Bourne through the regulatory process in 30 days. You know, I work at a redevelopment authority now that's overseeing the redevelopment of former Southwind Midway's Air Station. I do 150,000 square feet of commercial, 500 units in 30 days. So streamlining permitting is not a problem. It's being done. All you have to do is look to those examples and have the courage to accept that locally. But that means you can't do everything by special permit and send everything through 2 local committees. You know, you've got to make a commitment to that. Like Hyannis is a completely unutilized area. But the problem is you've got fractured ownership and you've got people that own property that don't have mortgages. They're just taking money out. There's no incentive to reinvest. But there's no redevelopment authority to assemble property. Because the town of Barnstable doesn't have the guts to say, this is a jewel, but we have to create a redevelopment authority with the power of eminent domain to be able to assemble property, to be able to implement the kind of public policy decisions that we know that make sense. And as it goes to water and wastewater, where there were only 2 communities that were really succeeding on wastewater 5 years ago, all 15 are moving in the right direction. Most of them are spending money, so we're making progress. As it relates to water, though, you know, there are some basic public policy and personnel decisions that you need to make as citizens. Because the poisoning of the water system in Hyannis last year came from the County Fire Training Academy. And that's not the first time. It was a PFOS spill last year, it was perchlorate 10 years ago. Because the kind of activity happens there is so inherently dangerous that that water supply is always at threat. And the county's getting ready. They paid the town of Barnstable $2 $10 million scrubbers on those wells. And now they're getting ready to intensify the activity at the fire training academy. So when you can't get to the point where you make common sense decisions that you need to close that fire training academy, because the county should not be allowed to poison the poorest census tract on the Cape on a rate every 10 years. If you don't have the courage, we don't have the courage as a community to do that, we have very little hope of making progress on it.
So Rodney, you want to shine some light on us here before we...
The only other thing I just want to add, I know it's getting late, so I'll keep it brief. I just want to thank Mashpee Commons for the constructive dialogue that they have. There's a few folks in the audience, the chairman of the board of selectmen, Tom O'Hara is here, affordable housing is here, we've got Christie from the commission, Paul Longley from the commission. We've got planning officials, former planning officials, chamber of commerce officials, sewer commission. I can never forget that, Tom. Tribal members.
And planning and Cape Cod Commission.
And planning and Cape Cod Commission. And I really think that it's nice to have these sessions for purposes of collectively exchanging ideas and other people's opinions.
Thank you, Rodney. Let's thank the panelists.